Hello, everyone, and welcome to week one of Intro to Digital and Social Media. This week, we are going to be just looking at the basic concept of communication across computers and digital and social media, and kind of how it works in relation to interpersonal communication and just a few trends that we've seen across platforms in the last couple of years. So, let's start by taking a look at the process of communication that we see in today's digital world and go from there. So, when we think about mediated communication, this refers to just any message that is sent out, but it's not directly person to person. So, when we talk with one another and we're face to face, that's called interpersonal communication. I'm sure some of you have learned about that in your speech classes or your communication classes. But in this class, we'll be talking about mostly mediated communication because when we talk about the digital realm, most of the time there is this in between of some kind of device that is delivering the message, and that is the mediator. And so, mediated communication or computer mediated communication, digital communication, all of these things, they kind of all go into the same category. And it's basically, it's not person to person, but person, device, computer, phone, etc., to person. And that makes a huge difference in how we communicate. Let me show you. So, the traditional model of communication or discussing something or sending messages to one another is you have a source. So, that could be me or you. And we take this information and we put it into a package of some sort. And this is called encoding. And basically, we're just trying to put it all together in a way that makes sense. Then we send that package through a message speaking, and we talk to the person in front of us or the people in front of us, whatnot. What they do is they take that message and the package and they unwrap it or decode it. And then it goes into their internal system, aka their brain, and they decide what that means, and then they give feedback, and that goes back to the source. And so it's this communication cycle, right? Um, and we call this conversation. And when you have conversation, you might see that there's this thing called noise at the bottom that can go into the message. And this is typically things that get misinterpreted or your own internal feelings or understanding of things. So sometimes the message isn't as clear as it could be. Sometimes it could just typically be noise. If we've all been there where you're trying to talk to somebody and there's lots of noise going on, or music's too loud, or you're distracted, and you're like, huh, can you say that again? And so noise can be literal noise, or it can be your own preconceptions. It can be lots of different things. This is the typical person to person communication model. When we talk about the digital realm, it gets a little bit messier and it looks a little like this. So, when you are speaking through some kind of computer or digital device, you have the sender, and then it can go through several different things. So it could be a text, it can be audio, it could be video, robot or AI, it could be different graphics. And there's all these ways to interact and send this message, right? To encode it. But all of these things can be decoded in the different ways as well. And your possible feedback that you might send back to the receiver could be different than if it were in person. So, for example, if you send an email or a text, sometimes or most of the time, people will say, I can't read like sarcasm or emotion through text, right? And so that's why we have like emojis or GIFs or memes, because they help us to send that emotion. Because text doesn't have that inflection. that you would have with interpersonal, or the facial features and reactions, right? And so we need that extra step. The thing with that is that because of these things, there can be more noise, more things that intercept the message and change the outcome to the receiver and the feedback to the person that was sending it. When we talk about mass communication, it's very similar to computer mediated communication, except you're sending it not only through some kind of mediator like a TV or the internet or whatever, but it's also going to the masses. And then that can create even more noise. And so we have to really think about what we're doing as digital creators, whether you are someone who's majoring in the College of Media and Communication or you're just taking this as an elective. We all become mass communicators at some point because we all use social media, usually on a daily basis. And if you don't, one, I congratulate you because it's incredibly hard in this day and age not to. But two, you are also missing out on a new wave of communication and probably one that's going to stay here for a long time. So it's something to consider. But when we talk about communicating as people in the mass media industry, or just as a person to lots of people on digital media, we have to think about what effects we can have. And mass media in general has an effect on two things. They have an impact on our behavior as individuals in a society and on our culture. And you're probably thinking, whatever, like, I can like read through all the mess. And that's great if you think you can do that. But you aren't always able to. And we'll talk a little bit about media literacy here in a second, but sometimes the message isn't always clear, or it's clouded by fake news or misinformation, or you're just not sure about what's going on. But on the other hand, some things that have an impact on our behavior and our culture are things like pop culture. I personally study pop culture as my research area, and it's amazing to see the impact and the effects it has on our society. And it could be anything from Disney to the latest blockbuster to the latest book. TikTok is a great example of this because there's always certain trends that are going around. And then once that trend kind of sizzles out, you see another one come up. And so all of these things really do impact us, even if they are in micro little doses. But with that, sometimes it has a negative influence, or it can create different ideas. And sometimes that's like, we get desensitized to violence. We have two major wars going on in the world right now. And at some point, you might have thought to yourself, I don't want to listen to it anymore. How is it affecting me? Personally, it is going to affect you in some way, but you may not see it immediately, right? But we have had so many wars in the past couple of decades that we're just kind of used to it. Same with violence on TV, and video games. But it's not just that. It's like it could be, the sexualization of things. Lots of different things go into that, and you become very desensitized to it, meaning that it just doesn't bother you or you don't care anymore. It could also lead to negative body image and dieting, but it could also mean, have a positive effect on that. We've seen an uptick in, especially your generation, not caring so much about that. But then we've had like the selfie effect, or the filter effect, to the Snapchat effect. There's a few different names on it, where it really does affect you because you don't know what is real and what isn't. So there's always that. We also have this idea of gatekeeping function that kind of goes hand in hand with the agenda setting function, especially on social media, with an algorithm, because what it's going to do is it's going to silo you or separate you into categories and just show you the same things over and over again. So you almost are in an echo chamber hearing the same things. And sometimes that's okay, right? If it's just about like a meme or something you think is funny, or a song or whatever. But if it's about something like news, or your religion, or things in society that really shape who you are, morally and ethically, that might have a problem because you're not getting outside influence to really help you decide what is right and what is wrong. It can also perpetuate stereotypes and challenge norms. Again, this can be positive and negative. And then it cultivates perceptions about how we see things. I always use the example of Disney adults because I am one. You either hate them or you love them, because they have been known to be considerably irritating to people because they just love Disney so much, right? And why would an adult want to go to these theme parks so much or celebrate these things? Well, social media has cultivated this perception, right? And it does it on any type of fandom that you see or any type of influence that's going around. You might have even seen like the trend, on TikTok of like 10-year-olds going into Sephora and just being like utterly miserable to the people that work there because they want to have a 10-step skin routine and they're 10, right? So, again, it cultivates perceptions, and all of these things can have positive or a negative impact on us. How does this work? Well, let me break it down a little bit more. So, gatekeeping is the process of determining what news, information, or entertainment will reach a mass audience. It's kind of like what is important, and who decides what's important. We'll talk a lot about that this semester. But basically, those in charge, or influencers who are very popular, they get to decide what will reach us and what will become popular, aka the Stanleys, right? Stanley Cups have become incredibly popular. People are fighting over them at Target. There was there was some kind of decision, right, that said, okay, this is the new cup. Anything else we're not going to talk about for a while. Agenda setting, and this is kind of goes hand in hand with gatekeeping, is the process of influencing what topics are considered critical for discussion by society. So are we talking about the war in Israel or the war in Ukraine? Or are we talking about the Barbie movie? Both are relevant at the moment. They're just different. Doesn't mean one is more important than the other. In any way, they're both important to pop culture at the time, and to history. So, with that, you have to think who's making these decisions about what we're discussing as a society and why is one more important than the other at the time. Again, some of it could be the desensitization of what's going on. So we don't want to talk about war. We want to talk about something more inspiring. But then again, it could be seen as insensitive to want to talk about a movie about a plastic doll and not about what's going on across the world. Again, it can perpetuate stereotypes and create norms. So what it does is media really shapes our culture, and it really challenges societal norms or really creates stereotypes. Let's talk about millennials and Gen Zs. There's always this debate about, millennials are so uncool and they can't get with the fashion trends, and Gen Z thinks we're so lame. And that's kind of this like perpetuating stereotype, right? And the millennials don't like boomers. That's just one of several that you could think of. Again, society and mass media kind of help advance this discussion. And then when you are cultivating perceptions, this is called the cultivation effect. And really, it relies heavily on mass media, television, things like that, where there's media portrayals of things. So it could be like, there's a bunch of cop television shows, and this is how people see cops in society, or doctors. Is it like Grey's Anatomy, or is it like 911? Is it more drama or whatever? Shows about Greek society, fraternities and sororities. We see all these different perceptions that have been cultivated through mass media. But when you stop and think about all these things, yes, we're influenced. We're influenced every day by all of these different things. But as someone who is, on social media, on the internet, watching television, listening to music, you have to start thinking critically. And part of that is media literacy. And this is just, you're taking the messages and you're decoding them and not just taking them for face value. We're going to talk about a lot of this next week when we talk about the cycle of fake news and how we get our news and how we really look to find the truth in things. But a little idea is that you're getting all these messages, right? We saw how that works, but every audience is going to interpret them differently, and this is where we get these, perceptions and the impact on culture. Um, and so you have to think about where you're getting the information, how you're getting it, the type of information it is, um, what special interest you have in it, and the impact it'll have on you. And then how is that all like working together to build this like silo or this house or this idea in your brain of how the world works. And we will learn how to deconstruct that next week. With all that being said, and you're seeing that there's this, actual trend of how communication is done and how we're getting information through social media, through the internet. I wanted to look at some social media trends through the past couple of years and see if they really impact you as not only a student, but a future professional and just as a person, and how it kind of goes with those gatekeeping, agenda setting things. So, just to be clear, social media as a whole is a platform that includes website applications that allows users to connect and interact with acquaintances, friends, family members, organizations, colleagues, etc. It allows us to exchange user-generated content. I know social media has always kind of been around for you, but I was in high school when it really took off. And it has been amazing to see the growth of it in the last like 15 to 20 years, and where it's going, and just the way that we can communicate because of it now. And so I just kind of want to, put that out there as a base. I know that we all know what social media is, but sometimes we may forget what that very basic definition is when we look at it as a whole. When people who study social media look at it, they call it a boundary crossing medium. Means that it's a communication channel that has personal and professional context, and they kind of interlock and cross each other. So there's not like a distinct, this is where I work, I'm going to keep work here, and this is my friends, and I'm going to keep them here, and this is my family, and I'm going to keep them over here. They kind of all like intertwined and get connected in some ways. And a lot of that is because social media, because you are friends with people from all across your life and not just certain areas. So with that being said, let's look at a timeline of when social media was first launched and kind of where it's gone. Now, I talked about I was in high school when it first kind of took off. I am 33. I'm not that old. But even before that happened, social media was really starting a lot earlier than that. So back in 1978, when computers were huge and you really couldn't do anything for them, and only very limited people had access to the internet, we got what it was called a bulletin board system. And people started posting on there and talking about different things. Actually, Star Trek was one of the big things that people talked about. Interestingly enough, pop culture, again, impacting. And so this is where it first started. And it was really just similar to maybe like Reddit or Tumblr, where somebody could post a question or a phrase or a statement, and then you could reply to it. Then in like the late 1980s, we get AOL Instant Messenger, AOL You've Got Mail, FidoNet, and then in 1997, Google.com was registered. That's how young Google is, 1997. From there, of course, we got things like Blogger, Live Journals, kind of like the first blogging websites. We get into Friendsters in 2002. Google acquires Blogger in 2003, and then that's when MySpace hit. So MySpace was kind of like the first big social media trend that took off. And it lasted, probably a year, 2 years before Facebook came in. Of course, Facebook was only available to people in college for a long time. You had to have an edu email, and it was only released to certain universities. I think around 2008, 2009 is when it started becoming available to like high schoolers, and then from there it became open to everyone else. From there, though, we get Reddit, and YouTube was only really invented in 2005. So again, very, very early in the stages of what it is in comparison to other types of media mediums. Twitter was in 2006. We get Goodreads and Tumblr around that time as well. Um, Foursquare became a big thing, and Clout became a big thing in 2008 and 2009. Foursquare, of course, is where you could like check in to places and let people know where you were, earn points for that. Clout was a way that you could use your meta score of social media, how much you posted, how many friends you had, what your influence was, to get like gift cards for things. Then we get WhatsApp, a way to internationally talk to people. We also got Pinterest and Instagram in around 2010. So the interesting thing about Instagram was, one, it was only available to iPhone users at the time. I remember I was an Android user. That was my first smartphone. Absolutely hated it. I've been an iPhone person ever since. And I was so excited when I got my iPhone because I could finally download Instagram. Like, oh my gosh, I had been waiting like a year for it. Pinterest was also one of those things you had to be invited by somebody that had access to it. And I remember the day that my friend got Pinterest, and then she was able to send me like the invitation. So those little things that like made it so special, now they're open to everybody, which I think is great. But it was also like, at the time, it was like this thing, right? 2011, we get Snapchat, Twitch, WeChat. WeChat is for Asian countries. Um, in 2012, Facebook bought Instagram, Twitter buys Vine. We got Vine and Tinder and Marco Polo. Vine was like chef's kiss, the best thing ever. I still wish we had it. I love TikTok, but Vine was just it. We keep going down the way and see all the different things. Discord came about. Periscope was kind of like a chat roulette where you could like talk to people in different ways, different platforms. We see TikTok come in about 2016, where Vine closes. Sadly, I remember the day that they like shut it down. It was so sad. Then we bring in Parler in 2018, of course, with the whole Trump debacle. And then we've gotten a few new things as we've progressed. And then, of course, in 2022, Elon Musk bought Twitter. He turned it to X last year. And then who knows what's going to be happening in the next couple of years. But you can see lots of things happened. I didn't even mention half of them. There was just tons and tons of things that kind of just hit on the bigger parts of them. So we've seen like the trend of how social media has grown, but I also want to introduce you to what is called the uses and gratifications theory, because I think this theory, along with other media theories, has really impacted how we use social media. And one of those things is that the uses and gratifications theory really talks about how people use it to satisfy their own needs and desires, right? So you're, and it's changed a little bit, right? So you used to post pictures and like song lyrics and like vague messages, right? Or you could go like poke each other on Facebook or all these things, and that's grown. And now you can like stream things, you can comment on people's stuff, and really a lot of it is just to say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing in my life, keep up with me. There's also the other side of it where it's like, hey, I want to be nosy, right? When people use uses and gratifications theory, and it's a very old theory, it's been applied to lots of things. Some people would probably say that it's a retired theory, but people that use it when they look at the effects of social media really don't say that it's either positive or negative. They just look at what it does, right? This is how people use it, and this is what they're getting out of it. They really argue that the impacts of social media, such as like isolation, engagement, boredom, whatever, entertainment, whether negative, positive, or neutral, are all really tied to the personality traits of individual users and the platform itself. And you'll kind of notice that, right? Like certain people use certain platforms, and they use them for different things to get different things out of them. Some of those you can see here. So we are kind of put into groups when people research social media. And these groups are utilitarian users. So sorry, utilitarian users. And basically, these are people that try to anticipate and think about all the possible consequences of anything about posting. They want to minimize problems. These are the people that use social media very limitedly, probably good for good reason. Then you have the planners who have a purpose for every post. They want to discuss things that are controversial. They really feel like there's a purpose for putting information out there. Then you have self-centered users who are really wanting to just put their information out there for personal gain, for the likes. They get that like dopamine hit from it. You have people that are unworried users. They don't give much thought about to what's going on or how they're engaging in social media. This is usually younger people that engage with it, or really older people because they're not really thinking about what they're putting on the internet. Then you have people that share freely. They just put anything and everything on there. They don't really care. And then you have protective users who use caution. They don't really reveal too much about themselves. They're very protected about their own privacy, and they don't want to violate other people's privacy. So, as we go through this semester, you might think about like, what kind of social media profile do I have? What kind of user am I? And does it change depending on the platform? So we've talked a little bit about the communication process, how it impacts culture, um, how social media came about, and then what kind of users there are. But how do we use it in today's society? What does the data show? Well, we use it for interpersonal communication, basically staying in touch with family, with our friends, networking. We use it for organizational communication. So we shop, we interact with coworkers, we follow our church, we follow our community, we follow our favorite influencers. We use it to get news. So public relations and crisis communication. We want to see viral messages about what's going on. We want to make sure that we know that Taylor Swift is at the last Chiefs game, things like that. We also use it for journalism and news reporting. So again, not just what's going on, but like, with different companies or different people, but also just what's going on around the world. We also use it for political communication. So you can learn about politics, you can learn about what they're doing, what they stand for. And we learn about health communication from it. I, of course, can't ask you to raise your hand because we're not in class, but I bet if I ask some of you, if you've ever asked about symptoms that you're feeling on social media, you probably have, especially during like the big COVID um, era. We're still in the COVID era, of course, but like when it was really big and you had to get tested and all these things, and then just finding out about what was going on with it, right? Big health communication. And then finally, global communication. We're no longer just limited to talking to people that are in like a 2-mile radius from us. We can talk to people across the world. And we've always kind of been able to do that with letters and different things, but the communication boundaries have lessened so much. So we get to do all these things. We talk to all these people, but how are we doing it? Well, we spend the most time on Instagram and TikTok. 39% of active people, or 39% of people have installed this or open it every day on Instagram, then TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat. And then we have people that spend 95 or more minutes on TikTok a day. Can personally probably say I've done that. It is addictive and you just go down rabbit holes. Then you have YouTube, of course, same kind of thing. Instagram, 51 minutes, 49 for Facebook. Twitter has fallen significantly since it turned to X. And then we have Snapchat, which is more personal. You don't talk to the masses, and you kind of do more interpersonal type communication with that. Let's see. As a worldwide total, people use Facebook the most, then Instagram, then TikTok, then Snapchat. Again, Twitter has kind of fallen from grace, or X. And then as we get more and more invested in digital communication, engagement goes up. So in 2020, you can kind of see TikTok took off and has stayed, then Instagram, Facebook, and then Twitter. We also see that people like to share certain types of content. It used to be that pictures and images were like the most popular ways to portray messages, but now we're seeing video take off because of TikTok. But most of the time, people really like it with captions, right? Because you don't always want to listen to it out loud. So video is how people really like to share the most content. Then like a typed out social media post or a picture, blog post, a product page. We're seeing a lot more of that on TikTok with like your linked items. And then other ways like just posting, links or different things like that. The average time that an adult user spends on platforms in 2022. So 45.8 minutes on TikTok. That was similar to the other graph we saw. YouTube again is big. Twitter, I think this was really before Elon Musk took over, or right when he was taking over and people were trying to see what was going on with like the blue check marks, things like that. Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, and then Reddit. We talk about communication and how we communicate, but when you are getting targeted ads or influencers on the different platforms that you use, a lot of times marketers are looking at certain things when they work with creators to influence audiences. And a lot of that is promoting their brand's value, how they can generate more entertainment, the strength of the community, what the audience perceives, how they can drive revenue, and how they can reach new people. So with that, I hope this gives you just a little introduction to what's going on and get you excited about what's going to be happening this semester. I love talking about this, and I love that it's constantly changing. So go get all your work done for the module, and I will talk to you next week.